So back to our vocabulary. Monotheism is only one God exists. Well, then what the hell is Ishtar? Who the hell's Moloch? You telling me Moloch works for God? Dr. Heiser? Are there other gods or aren't there? There's your question. Are there other gods or aren't there? Of course there are. We've got Baal, we've got Ishtar, we've got Moloch, we've got Dagon, we've got a billion of them. Go back to Mate Baal series. So yes, other gods exist. Monotheism is a lie. Unless you want to tell me that Moloch works for God, like a cosmic hitman. He employs all the bad guys eating babies out there. That's what he does. God's like, oh, look, a bunch of baby-eating gods. Let's hire them to punish my people when they make a bad choice. You think that's your God, dude? I don't want to be anywhere near it. Hi, and welcome to our Bible study channel.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. All those in the flesh, all of those who are listening, don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.
These are videos that go pretty in depth. First thing you should probably do is pause and read our 12 rules for reading biblical text. And if you don't like the 12 rules, or you don't understand the 12 rules, well, I don't have time to explain them all. Go back to the book that I wrote and uploaded on this channel, which takes you through the entire arc and how we made these quote-unquote 12 rules as a framework of what we found after 7 years digging meticulously and carefully through the text. So if you're confused, go do that. If I refer back, well, that's probably because we actually post these things in order. So they're all done in series. And if you jump in at the middle of a series without any schema or background knowledge, and you get all pissed off, well, that's also not our problem. This is a group where we go line by line, scroll by scroll through the text. Warning, we are not language sensitive, so if you can't handle some cussing, it's not the place for you. We also do not endorse nor approve of pretty much any mainstream theology. So if you're looking for that, also definitely not the place for you. We do a video about the characters that we use in our Bible study series. And the reason we do this is sort of so that they can kind of get in your head. So we do have a video explaining why we chose the people we chose and how their sort of energy characteristics go along with the biblical characters to modernize it for people so they know what the heck we're reading. Clearly, the Roman Church was not doing their job and looking for the lost sheep of the reunited House of David. So that's what we're doing, okay? We're taking that away from them because they screwed it up. The brilliant rabbis also down there in Babylon are also not looking for the lost sheep of the reunited kingdom of David. So you're not going to hear, let's follow Rome. And you're not going to hear, let's follow the rabbis on this channel. Because, you know, sorry, not sorry, but the Bible wasn't actually written for the corrupt Levitical priesthood post-Babylon and Persia to read it through their little janky books. And it also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of pagan 4th century church fathers. So we're not doing that either. You guys can both have a seat. Oddly enough, The Bible also wasn't written to be read through the eyes of some dumbass scholars with pieces of paper that say they're smarter than everyone, but have never seen a Davidic covenant in their life. Not written for them either. You know who it's written for? It's written for the reunited house of David, who are actually in covenant and are actually the sheep. That's who it's written for. That's why nobody else can understand what the heck's going on. What you are going to hear is what you're supposed to hear, which is, let's follow the king. And let's get started.
So, we are going to war.
Yes. And welcome back. Welcome back. We are going to try to wrap up part 4 of our Apotheosis. I think it's 8, where we're talking about David and the census. And what we have sort of realized is we've got people running around in ancient times and probably today who are signing and inheriting contracts from gods that you say don't even exist within a legal system running in the background that they've never even heard of. And I would argue that today this is more true than in David's time, because in David's time they didn't have the, we'll call it deception or mindset of this word monotheism. And, you know, how convenient that is for the religions to tell you that only one God exists while not telling you about the contracts they're making with the other ones. Just saying. Just saying. Just saying. You don't have a choice because there's only one and it's ours. Yeah, okay. So our agenda, we're going to quickly review the census and the sacrifice rituals of that census to kind of ground ourselves. That this sort of spun off of 2 Samuel with David. We're going to go a little deeper into monotheism, sacrifice, sin, and atonement, and what happens when these words get shifted under modern categories rather than ancient thinking. We're going to see that this idea of strict monotheism brings us a cosmic hitman problem that so many scholars keep running into. It also gives us a religious jargon problem. We're going to talk about some of the ancient Near East gods and contract law, and our future direction is next. This is either the last segment of this census with David, or if we don't finish today, we'll do another quick one to finish it up. I'm going to do one video straight through, but I'll probably have to chop it into pieces in order to upload if we go too long, which I usually go pretty long. Then we're going to go straight back to Luke, and we'll probably, hopefully, get through 6 through 9-ish. And then we're going to jump over and check out Stephen's speech in Paul's paganisms and look really deeply at that now that we've got a lot more grounding as to what's taking place in Acts and the worldview coming from James over in Luke and the worldview coming from James about Paul in Acts, right? So we've got those two pieces. If you go all the way back to our Luke series intro, we're reading through the lens that James has commissioned both, right, as a defense from Nero. So we're comparing Luke to Acts and how those kind of match up. And sort of Stephen's speech lies in the middle in that it makes a lot more sense as he's going through the history and making his accusation before he's stoned to death by Saul of Tarsus and his men. So we're going to take a look at that and see if we can glean anything else out of it now that we have a whole lot more background. We're going to jump and see the prophets Joel and Micah. And also at some point coming up, sort of kind of, we're going to be looking at Samson and the story of Samson to show why bloodlines were actually important and possibly why they're important now. Okay, and that's sort of where we're going. But today we're going to finish up David a little bit. And just to remind ourselves, this census wasn't just a random thing. It's David saying, I'm taking responsibility He's nationalizing the quote unquote sins of the people or the contract violations, right? And he's taking that responsibility as king. And the system reacts and says, okay, David, here's everything. And then David kind of freaks and goes, oh, no, too much. Ah, what did I do? Right? He steps into the room like a grown adult and he's ready to handle business. And the universe turns around and hands him a breach from Israel that's been simmering for years. A nation filled with unresolved covenant violations. A legal system just waiting for someone to nationalize this and take liability. He's got an enforcement agent, right? Think of Reshaf type, just ready on standby. Like, let me go. And the moment he says, I'll take this on, everything detonates in his face. That's where we're standing. And then he turns to his God, who is relational, seeking help. So David understood what he was doing in taking the census to nationalize these contract violations, nationalize Israel's sin or covenant and contract discrepancies. What he didn't realize was how big the breach already was. So he wasn't arrogant about this. He might have been a little prideful about his own ability to fix it and handle it as king. And, but this wasn't, I'm going to take a census to prove how mighty this country is. Like, that's not what he was doing, okay? He was simply underestimating the scale of the problem through the arrogance in his own covenant, the arrogance in his own confidence with his God, the arrogance that everyone was following right along just like he was, right? And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you guys are doing something else? I didn't realize. So David was sort of, swimming in his own little world for a little while and not really seeing how bad it was out there among the people. I want you to imagine walking into a room and you think you're flipping on a light, but you hit the breaker that powers the entire building. Alarms go off, emergency systems activate, and you're like, wow, that escalated fast. That's David in this scene. That's David. He steps into this blast radius of a contract violation, a covenant violation, or many covenant violations, of a breach that he didn't even cause. And the wild part is David doesn't run. He doesn't blame. He doesn't collapse. He steps up and he fixes it. And that's why he's David. That's why he's David. That's why we love David over here. So his burnt offering, if you recall, it's just resetting the jurisdiction. Okay? In ancient Near East logic, the burnt offering does one thing. It closes the breach and resets the legal status of the people of the land. So this isn't forgiveness, emotion, devotion, appeasing the gods. It's filing the right paperwork. It's the ritual equivalent of clearing the slate, shutting the door that the census opened. And when I say the census opened, it's shutting the door that nationalized this contract violation, brought it to the doorstep of David. So we're taking all of that into one big giant conglomerate group of contract violation, shutting that door and removing the agent, the punishing agent's status or hold over, because those contracts are null and void. So it's removing the standing. So your Reshaf or whatever enforcing power, or the one that's sending out Reshaf, like a Baal Hadad, so to speak, or an Ishtar, it's removing and losing jurisdiction, okay, for the other god and its hitmen, if you will. It resets the territory to neutral. The system, the bat phone stops. It stops flashing red. The alarms all calm down. And it's saying the king has taken and nationalized this responsibility. It's the king's way of saying, I've handled the paperwork on behalf of the people. So it feels very scorched earth-like, because that's what a burnt offering is supposed to do. In a burnt offering, nothing is eaten, nothing shared. There's not one single piece of the animal that is kept. Everything on the altar is consumed. And so that's a ritual or a legal way of saying there's no leftover obligations. The contract's done. We're not sharing a table. We're not doing tableship covenant here. There's no relational entanglement. This is a full reset. It's the opposite of a peace offering where you share the meal with your God and have that tableship covenant. And that's what David does next. He's reopening the relationship channel, but also he nationalized it with the census. So this is on behalf of Israel. Okay, it's about restoring this relational access, not just, happy feelings. It means the relationship's active and we can sit at the same table and come into covenant. It's reopening communication, reestablishing goodwill, signaling that the king and the deity are back in alignment. And in that last line, the king and the deity are back in alignment. I would argue David was never out of alignment, but he was out of alignment in only that he took on the national contract violations onto himself. He nationalized the debt. Does that make sense? So it's his responsibility. He was still able to turn to God in that moment and lean on his God. So David is actually fixing two layers at once. He's dealing in this legal system, and he's resetting, closing the breach, stopping the agent, restoring legal order. That's the burnt offering. And then layer 2 is the relational covenant with his God. He's got to reestablish access, signal loyalty, restore the land, restore the bond, and step back into the relational lane, into that Davidic covenant, and carrying that forward with the entire nation, because he's just taken the census and legally taken those breaches onto his responsibility. That's the peace offering. He's making peace on behalf of himself. He sits by himself and does that peace offering, but he's also doing it on behalf of Israel. And interestingly, David is our only figure in the Hebrew Bible who consistently operates on both layers. He's in legal compliance and relational loyalty. He definitely knows the system. He knows the laws. He knows his God. And he uses the system without being ruled by it. This is why it's so important to remember the ark and the sacrifice were separate under David, because he's walking that tightrope between legal and relational. So what this combination, it tells you that David's breach was real and legal. The burnt offerings required because the census opened a jurisdictional door at a national level. The agents acting legally, not emotionally. And God wasn't appeased. The system was reset in the architecture of the law. His relationship with God is above the ritual system. He had tableship covenant with his God. This is relational. He calls out to his God in a relational way, not by doing certain steps. So this moment is a legal fix and a relational restoration. He repairs the system, communicates with his God, and realigns. It's brilliant because in ancient Near East, kingship logic, the king's responsible for the land, the people, the covenant status of the nation, the contract breaches, and the enforcement cycles that come from those breaches. So when David takes the census, he's not being prideful in the way that people think of today. He's doing the equivalent of, I'm stepping up, I'm taking responsibility, and I'm going to face this head on. It's not sin. The census isn't sin in the moral sense. It's liability in the legal sense. And that's what people are missing because they're not understanding ritual logic. He sees the scale of it and freaks out. That's the entire beat of the story. He sees the agent and he's like, oh gosh, this is bigger than I thought. He pivots into relational mode to his God Ask, help me fix this. Tell me what to do. God gives him the reset protocol. David, go to the DMV. He executes the fix, and the agent stops. This isn't a moral drama. This is a jurisdictional crisis with a king doing a legal and relational override. That's what you're seeing. So not only are modern ideas of how the ancient Near East worked when looking at stories like King David, but with this vocabulary reset, you have a modern Western theological meltdown because their worldview can't hold if you reset the vocabulary to the non-evolved terms, okay? And you just take the terms for what they were back in the day. So we're going to take a look at monotheism, sin, atonement, and we get a cosmic hitman problem. Because 2 Samuel can't be read through modern, quote-unquote, monotheism. So what do I mean when I just say modern monotheism? Well, today, monotheism means only one God exists. And as we see it, as we think of monotheism today, that idea didn't even exist in David's world, okay? The English word monotheism is a post-Enlightenment category. The idea that only one God exists is a very late development. This is post-exile, Persian, and later. We're going to talk about why that was important. In David's world is divine plurality. David's God is his covenant God. There's messengers, destroyers, angels, sons of God, holy ones, councils. These are real categories, but you can't flatten this into God does everything himself without breaking the story. So whatever you want to call them today, messengers, angels, holy ones, councils of beings, these are real things. And we put those labels on them now with things like angels and demons. But that's not what that's not what he thought of them as, right? They were different agents with different hierarchies of different gods. So if there are different gods, then there isn't just one God that exists. There's one God for him. But that doesn't mean there's only one God in existence. And that carries all the way through Jesus. Jesus never told you there was just one God. Jesus told you there was his God who had a higher authority than the others. That's what's going on. And if you don't see it that way, then you're flattening this into God did everything himself, and that breaks the whole story. If there only one God exists, then that only one God had to do everything. Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. So David wasn't a monotheist. He's a loyalist, and he's loyal to his God in a world that's filled with divine beings. Some of them are other gods of other territories. So when you go to these ancient Near East, quote unquote, scholars, like a Michael Heiser, he can't tell you that there's more than one God. He may use that term, but he's like, but I don't really mean gods. I mean, like, demons that work under the God. Well, you can't, because then you've got David's God that Heiser people call Yahweh. You've got this one God that exists, and every other divine being works for that one God. That's what's making David's God look like a lunatic, doing all these different things, punishing, not punishing, changing your mind. It's bizarre because they cannot say, actually, there's other gods with other contracts. That's not how they're looking at this. They're flattening it into everyone works for, quote unquote, David's God, who Michael Heiser, quote unquote, calls Yahweh. That's how they're seeing it. It's how they're rewriting this to make sense of it. And it just flattens everything under one hierarchy. And David's God, Jesus' father, becomes a cosmic hitman, hiring the mafia in to take care of people he doesn't like. And that's not the story. That's not the story. So where does this only one God exists idea come from? Well, basically, lately, guys, all roads lead to Rome, yeah, but it really leads to Persia. This is a pre-exile. David's God is supreme for Israel, but other nations have their own gods. Dagon, Ishtar, Baal, all these different gods. In the Babylonian exile, they had a loss of land, temple, and monarchy, and they needed a new identity. The Persian period comes in with the Zoroastrian influence, which has cosmic dualism in a moralized universe. And one mighty God versus all the evil of the world becomes an attractive evolution of this idea. So in post-exile Judaism, we're moving towards this metaphysical monotheism, and then they retroactively project it backward. And one of the big points I want to make here is that in Second Temple Judaism, post-exile, post-Persian, you never hear, right? The story you hear is everyone's blaming God for Israel's failure. Let me explain this. And that needs to flip, okay? What you hear in the story, and it's very subtle, but the general, it goes something like this. God punished Israel because, Israel did some stuff. But but that's a monotheistic view, right? One God that hires his cosmic hitman to come in. Once you see ancient Near East and other gods that offer other contracts, you can see that Israel needs to stop blaming God. Because what's happening is Israel signed contracts with other gods. Israel signed contracts with gods that weren't theirs. That's it. This is why there's so much adultery talk in the Old Testament. God's like, you're cheating on me with that God. Why? Because you're signing contracts with them. So this isn't a matter of one God over everything that hires hitmen to come in and sends his demons out to punish you because he didn't like it, because he's jealous. This is Israel screwing it up and losing the covenant with their God because they signed contracts with other gods. And the other gods are the ones doing the punishing. That's a whole nother ball game. But Israel coming back post-Babylon doesn't want to say, we messed up and signed other contracts and got into a heap load of shit. That's not the story. The story is, well, our God punished us because we were bad. But we only have one God, and that's ours. They're not admitting where they went off to other gods and signed other contracts. They don't want to talk about that part. They want to say, well, our God punished us because we worship these other gods that don't really exist. That's what they're doing. David never thought of the sentence, only one God exists. That idea wasn't even in play. So sin in David's world. So we've got to get a handle of this idea of sin in David's world and begin to understand that this is not just moral dirt on your character. It can be, right? There is moral things that you can do to break your contract and go out of bounds. But we've got to start looking at sin as a legal breach. You're breaking a contract morally or with legal ritual. Does that make sense? The whole thing, the moral part, your 10 Commandments part, your be kind on the nice scale part, that's part of your legal contract. Okay? But there's other ways to legally breach it than simply moral conduct. Because sin is not a list of behaviors that someone doesn't like. It's a contract violation inside a legal and binding covenant. So David's census, we know he's nationalizing the breach. He's taking a local violation and making it a national violation. The plague is not, quote unquote, punishment. It's an enforcement. It's a legal consequence triggered by the breach of his covenant and taking on the covenants of the other gods, who the other gods have legal jurisdiction to come in and act. It's enforcement by the agents of the other gods that are in contract with Israel. So his role isn't to sit and repent. David's not repenting. David's intercessing as a king. He's negotiating. He's paying it and he's resetting the boundary.
What do you do with the
So it's a violation within a legal
world
system, not
that wasn't
just
monotheistic?
moral
Because that
failure. here.
that's what Yahweh
This
was.
story in and of
Lord.
itself. Never mind the rest of David, just this one. This destroys the idea of human sacrifice for sin model. Because if sin is a legal breach, then atonement becomes legal repair, not blood magic. David doesn't atone by dying. He doesn't atone by offering himself. David pays the legal fee, the legal paperwork, to reset the boundary. The burnt offering is not for sin. It's a legal compliance ritual, closing the breach of a contract. Nothing in 2 Samuel resembles substitution, human sacrifice, cosmic guilt, moral cleansing. It's all legal. So this Christian model of Jesus died for everyone's sins isn't based on David's worldview at all. If we see Jesus as a Davidic heir, his role is inherited, legal, not sacrificial. Davidic kings represent the nation in covenant. They're carrying national liability. They negotiate legal breaches. They restore covenant order. Jesus, as the Davidic heir, inherits all those covenants and contracts. He also inherits the throne, the legal responsibilities, including the death contract. And this is what he's saying when he takes it all the way back to Adam. Sons of Adam, with the Adamic breach, signing the death contract. When he says, I am the root and the offspring of David. The root goes back to Adam, the original contract breach. The offspring means I'm inheriting all covenants through the Davidic throne. So his death is not this idea of appeasement, substitution, and cosmic blood magic. It's a legal act required to overturn the death clause from the Garden of Eden. The king repeatedly says, I'm laying down my life. He's doing it to reverse the ancestral contract. It just so happens to be done within a Roman legal system that is utilizing crucifixion as a way of punishment, as a way of execution, because he was accused of sedition. But he could have died anyway. I don't mean anyways. I mean in any way. There could have been many methods to his death. And if he is laying down his life, he's doing it to reverse the contract, regardless of the method of how he died. That's what I'm saying. Jesus was not part of the Levitical priesthood post Babylon and Persia. Jesus is Davidic, which goes way before this system. He's not a Levitical sacrifice. He's a Davidic king performing a legal reversal. Jesus is not part of the Levitical priesthood system. He's a Davidic king performing a legal reversal, not a Levitical human sacrifice. With some metaphor. The Levitical priesthood didn't do human sacrifice. Officially, okay? Human sacrifice was not part of the Levitical system. Now, whether it was or wasn't on the down low, that's a whole nother story, okay? But the official Levitical sacrifice system involved animals. Jesus wasn't that, okay? You cannot turn him into a human sacrifice. No matter how many metaphors to goats, rams, lambs, and sheep you want to throw out, it's not happening. They're so desperate to make Jesus this Levitical sacrifice through the Levitical system that they go all the way back to Abraham and the ram. A ram is not a sheep. And they're like, that's foreshadowing Jesus when the ram came out of the bushes. Why are we comparing Jesus to a ram now? Like, rams are a whole different thing in the story, okay? Passover lamb, Levitical lamb, two different things. Like, all these mixed metaphors because they want to insist that Jesus was a human sacrifice when human sacrifice wasn't part of the Levitical system to begin with, okay? This was abhorrent. The idea of human sacrifice is abhorrent to a Davidic heir. This is not something to go, well, Davidic heirs don't play with human sacrifice until now. Like, we're just going to follow along and we're going to do it the Moloch way. Like, that's not the story. Okay, that's not the story. Doesn't work. You can't suddenly make him a human sacrifice. Oh my goodness. So the big reversal here is overturning the death contract. The death contract in Genesis is a legal decree, not some kind of curse. Okay? And the day you eat it, you will die. That's a legal consequence. Humanity enters a death-bound contract that day. And no one can reverse it unless you're a covenant holder, the legal heir, the king. So Jesus, as the Davidic heir, is performing the legal override. And he can't reverse death unless you lay your life down. Resurrection is the legal proof that the override worked. This is not the same as atoning for sin. This is reversing death and opening the covenant to eternal life and offering that contract on behalf of Israel, just like David did, representing his people as king. He's reestablishing the Davidic kingdom. The core of Jesus's gospel is not guilt removal, Paul. It's death reversal. Modern theology misses all of this. But why? Because they read the Bible through categories that the Bible doesn't use. They read it through monotheism. Only one God exists. Sin is a list of behaviors. It's just moral dirt. Atonement is a human sacrifice substitution, not a legal mechanism. Sacrifice is a punishment. Jesus is a cosmic scapegoat, but none of these categories exist in David's world, ancient Near East legal system that David's working under, Hebrew covenant logic, pre-exile theology. If you read David correctly, and honestly, scholars, the entire Christian atonement model collapses. The Davidic model emerges, and it's legal and also relational at the same time. And because everything collapses, that's why they can't talk about it. So back to our vocabulary. Monotheism is only one God exists. Well, then what the hell is Ishtar? Who the hell's Moloch? You telling me Moloch works for God? Dr. Heiser? Are there other gods or aren't there? There's your question. Are there other gods or aren't there? Of course there are. We've got Baal, we've got Ishtar, we've got Moloch, we've got Dagon, we've got 1 billion of them go back to mate dial series. So yes, other gods exist. Monotheism is a lie. Unless you want to tell me that Moloch works for God, like a cosmic hitman. He employs all the bad guys eating babies out there. That's what he does. God's like, oh, look, a bunch of baby eating gods. Let's hire them to punish my people when they make a bad choice. You think that's your God, dude? I don't want to be anywhere near it. That idea comes from monotheism. Oh, well, no, they're demons. So now Moloch is a demon? You're telling me Ishtar is a demon? Just a small level enforcer like Reshath. Moloch's a demon? Dagon's a demon? Millions of people throughout history, they were gods. They have their own contracts. They weren't enforcing agents sent by someone else. They had their own contracts. So we have to throw out this idea of monotheism. Otherwise, God becomes a cosmic hitman. God becomes a God that hires cosmic hitmen under him. Sin. Sin is a contract violation within a legal covenant. That contract violation could be ritual, legal, or that contract violation could be moral. We've got atonement, which is legal repair of a contract violation, period. Okay? So when you're thinking of sin, you've got to understand the legal part of a covenant. The legal part, as well as the moral part. It's not all morality and belief. There's a ritual system within this structure that people are very ignorant of. So stage 1 of this monotheistic worldview. Only one God exists. This is a Sunday school Enlightenment post-Reformation Western philosophical version. It's not ancient, it's not biblical, it's not Near Eastern. This is the version people think they believe, but no one actually lives like this. So stage 2 is, well, okay, ancient people thought the other gods existed, but they were wrong. This is 19th and 20th century academic move. Well, they were primitive. They misunderstood nature. They projected human traits onto storms. They were superstitious. It's condescending, colonial, and historically inaccurate. But it lets Christians keep the idea of monotheism intact. Stage 3 comes along, and it's like, okay, the scholars are like, other gods existed, but only in their land. This is where he gets the Michael Heiser with the, well, they were attached to the land, and that land wasn't Israel, so Israel's in it. Bullshit, Heiser, bullshit, okay? Yes, they do have territorial pieces, but remember the floor, back to our ritual series, right, where we talked about gaining access on the floor. This is the territorial deity compromise. It tries to preserve monotheism by saying, well, they weren't real gods, just local misunderstandings. That's not how the biblical authors talk. Shamash is real. Baal's real. Moloch is real. Asherah is real. Mot is real. Rashaf is real. Dagon's real. So stage 4 comes along. Well, okay. Maybe they were entities, but not really gods. This is the evangelical dodge a la Heiser. They were all demons. This is a category collapse. It flattens gods, spirits, ancestors, territorial beings, underworld powers, storm deities, fertility deities, all in one bucket. Enforcing agents, all into one bucket labeled bad angels. It's tidy, but it's wrong. Israel's whole problem wasn't that they lost to other gods. Their God lost. No. Israel was involved in contract breach. The exile wasn't our God was weak. Our God didn't protect us. Our God punished us. Bullshit. It was, we violated our covenant. So our God withdrew protection because we're in covenant with other gods. And all the other nations' gods were legally allowed to act because we signed contracts with them. This wasn't a cosmic war. It's legal jurisdiction. They gave their inheritance away via signing legal covenants with other gods. Period, Israel. That's what you did. You're still doing it today. In David's world, gods were legal entities with jurisdiction. These weren't metaphors. These weren't demons and fallen angels. These weren't false gods. False covenant gods, maybe. Not false, not pretend gods. They were real beings with real authority. And the humans could enter covenants with them, break covenants with them, owe obligations to them, receive protection, violate their boundaries, and receive punishment from all of these gods. This is why the prophets are screaming about other gods, not because they're fake, because they're pretend, they're all in your head, but because they're real, legally binding. So Israel didn't lose to other gods. They signed contracts with them. This is the part that modern theology will not handle. But the ancient Near East took it for granted. They don't want to say that. They want to blame God and not blame Israel. In David's world, Ishtar's not a demon. Ishtar's a god. Full stop. She has her own jurisdiction, authority, contracts, worshipers, legal standing in the divine ecosystem. David's world is pluralistic. Okay? These aren't demons pretending to be gods. They're real gods with real jurisdiction and very, very real covenants and consequences. But later, Judaism panicked and downgraded all of the rival gods into demons. This was not theological insight. This was survival. Because after the exile, the logic is, well, we can't admit other gods exist because that makes us look like we lost to them. That looks like we worshiped other gods. We ran, not ours. And when post-exile, quote-unquote, Jews came back, right? You have to remember the whole mythos of Judaism to begin with. The whole argument of the Persians coming in and taking over and assigning all their priesthood people and assigning their little Pharisee people. Their whole argument is that we're Judah and we were loyal. Israel wasn't loyal. We were the good ones that was always loyal to God. That's what the story is. So we're the original people. We go back to David. Moses said so with our laws. We're the ones that hold the truth. That's the entirety of Judaism post-Persia. Because Persia's taking over and we've gone through this before, right? This is a Moses said so time. We're the righteous ones, not those northern Israel. We're the southern tribe and we're the right ones. They're not going to say we signed contracts with other gods. That was them. Remember? We have to curse Ephraim. Ephraim were the ones that did all that. Not us in Judah. That's why we get to come back and take over. That was Persia's excuse. So they can't say we were running off with other gods. That no, we've always been faithful to our God. So they rewrote the categories. Rival gods become demons, divine beings become angels, and cosmic prosecutors or enforcers become Satan. The problem, though, is once you downgrade gods into demons, the legal system they hold collapses. Because in the ancient Near East, gods have jurisdiction, contracts, legal authority, and territorial rights. But demons? Demons have no jurisdiction, no covenants, no legal standing, no authority, and no contract. So the later Jewish Christian tradition systems end up with a legal contradiction. These beings are demons with no authority, but they have binding contracts over humanity. But Jesus overrides them. But they were also never really gods. But they also kind of were gods, but not gods, but fallen angel gods. But they all work for God, but we can't say any of this out loud. Like, do you see how they can't explain this? They can't explain it. But God sends them out to torture you because he doesn't like what you did. Like, it doesn't make sense. The Davidic air model solves the entire problem. Gods are real, contracts are real, jurisdictions are real, legal consequences are very real. I've got 48 years of that. Kings mediate between realms and negotiate or override contracts. So when Jesus steps in as heir, he's not just in spiritual warfare battling demons or battling cosmic evil or doing blood magic, appeasing God's wrath, performing an animal substitution. He's doing exactly what we saw David do. He's acting as a legal representative of the covenant people to renegotiate or override any binding contracts. This includes the death contract in Eden, taking national liability for covenant breaches, and all of those ancestral obligations. So, for example, how would Jesus override Ishtar's contract? Like, let's just say, if Ishtar's a god, not a demon, how is Jesus overriding another god's contract? Well, because in the Davidic legal model, a king can override any contract that's affecting his people that are in covenant in his kingdom. A king can renegotiate any contract on behalf of his nation. He can nullify ancestral obligations and reverse legal decrees, even death. This is why the resurrection is a legal proof of the override. He's not overriding demons. He's overriding contracts. And the enforcing agents of those contracts, those janky-ass contracts, are the demons, right? So the enforcing agents come in because the people are in a janky-ass contract. He's overriding the contract, so the demons have no legal jurisdiction to act anymore. He's not defeating gods. He outranks them legally as Davidic king. He's not fighting cosmic evil. He's reversing legal decrees. It's a whole different ballgame. The Christian system makes no sense because it completely lost this legal framework. Once Christianity came in and moralized sin into a list of behaviors they don't like, they made rival gods into demons. They universalized monotheism, so now everybody works for God. They turned Jesus into a cosmic sacrifice, but also a human sacrifice. They completely erased the legal system. They lost the entire logic of how any of this works. And then Heiser comes in. Well, they were gods, but they all work for the big one. This is our cosmic hitman problem going around in evangelical circles. This is the modern halfway house. It flattens categories, collapses systems. It uses ancient Near East cosmology, phraseology, or vocabulary, sort of. But it perverts monotheism by making the entire cosmos into a bureaucracy. It turns independent deities into God's employees. It's like saying, well, yeah, there's many gods, but they're all middle managers in Yahweh's corporation. Seriously? Seriously, Heiser. Well, they rebelled, but God still lets them, over the land. So they're in charge, but they're not in charge. But really? Your God is allowing Moloch to be in charge just because? What? What are you saying? Well, God put them over this land, and then they rebelled. What? And God just left them there? They're okay, eat the babies then. No problem. This is the same logic that comes up with Paul has an angel of Satan, and Jesus is like, nah, we're just going to leave it there. Like, what are you thinking? Seriously. This is not an ancient worldview. It's a modern attempt to save this idea of monotheism. And this is where we get the Yahweh fad. Thanks, Dr. Heiser, with a big old eye roll. We do not like Dr. Heiser over here. We like that he pointed out original sin's not a thing. But after that, we don't have much use for him. The assumptions that scholars like Heiser make are massive. Christ is some kind of Rorschach test to see if you're in their clique. It's not a title. Go out into the world and ask 10 Christians, who is Christ? Well, he's a cosmic creator. He's the eternal Son, the pre-existent Logos, the resurrected Savior, the Davidic King, the Messiah, the light being that Paul met in the desert. He's the metaphysical essence of God. He's the God part that you can see. He's the seen God, not the unseen God. He's the second person of the Trinity. Seriously. It means so many different things. And now we're on to this giant Yahweh fad. And now, because of people like Heiser, we've got this Yahweh fad. Yahweh is the same problem as the term Christ. It's a single term used for multiple incompatible beings. My Christ is not the same as an evangelical Christ. The evangelical Christ, they believe that Jesus is the creator. And that's what they say. They tell you that the Christ is the creator. I say God the Father, God Almighty, is the creator. It's one or the other. It's not both. Evangelicals say Christ, the eternal being, is the creator. That's what they're saying. That is not the same. And then they say, well, that's Jesus. No, I'm saying Christ is anointed king. God the Father is the creator. We're talking about two different entities, okay? Just because of the word Christ. Same thing with Yahweh fad. This damn Heiser brought up this Yahweh shit. It's got the same problem. It's a single term used for incompatible beings. So when you're out there in the world and someone says Yahweh, they might mean it's a scholarly word for generic Lord. It's a tribal God of David, the cosmic creator, storm god of the south, storm god of Arabia, covenant god of Moses, Jesus' father, philosophical god of later Judaism, the Christian father, the Trinity, the mystical tetragrammaton, the random deity and graffiti inscriptions, a god with a consort Asherah, god of the prophets, god of the rabbis, god of the sacred name movement in Hebrew roots. Which one? They can't define it. They use it however they want, just like they use Christ however they want. Different groups use it to mean completely different things. In Hebrew roots, generally, Yahweh is the Father or a Trinity with a Hebrew accent. Scholars use this as a placeholder for Lord instead of saying the Israelite national God. Unitarians, it's Jesus' father. Traditional Christians is Jehovah, but modernized. Pagans and mystics think of it as a Canaanite storm god. Mystics, it's a magical vibration or divine code. Linguists, it's a reconstructed pronunciation. Yeah, right. Archaeologists, it's a regional deity with a consort. Fundamentalists, one true God. Evangelicals, yeah, it's a problematic Bronze Age deity. The term is not anciently stable. It's a post-exile scribal theological retrofit. David did not use this as a personal name. The monarchy didn't treat it as a personal name. The prophets use it inconsistently. The scribes weaponized it. Exiles reinterpret it. Second Temple redefines it. Masoretes vocalize it. Christians translate it. Modern people reinvent it. But it's a moving target. Heiser didn't invent this word, but he sure made it popular. Before Michael Heiser came along, scholars used this Yahweh term academically, but Hebrew roots used it devotionally. Jehovah's Witnesses used Jehovah. Christians completely ignored the term altogether. After Michael Heiser, everybody starts using it just like Christ. Evangelicals start using it. YouTube theologians adopt it. Lay people are pronouncing it. and everyone's treating it like a real name. He didn't create the term. He created the modern pop theology version of the term. So I think most people assume that Christ is the son of the Trinity, being thing, where Yahweh is the father of the Trinity. That's what they're assuming. That's not accurate in ancient Near East studies. It's an academic term that takes the place of Lord, but it's now so overloaded, can't communicate anything clearly. So if you say Yahweh, your listener has to decode. Which tradition are you referencing? Which theology? Which metaphysics? Which historical period? What scholarly camp? Which pronunciation? Which identity? This isn't communication, it's chaos. It doesn't give me any insight into your theology, other than you're trying to sound more Hebrewish, which is ridiculous. Religious terms simply aren't meaningful. They're theological cocktail blenders. And Yahweh has become nothing more than a semantic junk drawer with hundreds of years of theological baggage. Exactly what they did to the term Christ. This is why I piss people off when I say David Christos. David Christ. People get so angry because they've taken the term to mean anointed of God, and they've made it into an eternal being. The Bible calls David Christ because he's anointed. It calls Jesus Christ because he's anointed. Both Christ and Yahweh are just modern fandom terms. These aren't ancient categories. These terms have become brand labels, identity markers, tribal passwords. Like if you say the word, you're like us. You get to be in our little group. They're theological shortcuts. Okay? If I run around saying Yeshua and Yahweh, I'm trying to signal that I know something about the ancient Near East that you don't. I'm more authentic than you. But I'm not going to explain my theology. I'm running around saying Yeshua, and then I'm telling everyone that he's the creator? Paul's Greek logos? Dude, you're slapping a Hebrew word onto a Greek logos. And you're going to try to tell me you know about theology? It's a defensive projection, or it's exclusivity claims because they have an ego. It's not precise. It's not accurate. It's not even historical. It's not a narrative anchor for the Bible and reading biblical text. They're modern ego, pride, BS, throwing it around to seem more important than someone else. That's how they're using the name. They need to explain their theology and who they serve. What entity are they serving? What deity? What theology? Post-Constantinian? Well, first century. First century what? First century Davidic? First century Persian? First century Pharisees? First century Levitical? What's your logic? First century Greek? Or some mishmash of all of it like Paul? Which theology? These words are so overloaded they no longer communicate anything. So we replace these words with David's God, Jesus' father, Jesus, son of David, the anointed king, the covenant heir, because these words are actually clear. They have context and they're unambiguous. Christ and Yahweh are the exact same kind of problem. It's one word with 50 meanings, but zero clarity. Everyone assumes their meaning is the default. And the original meaning, well, that gets buried under 2,000 years of theological sediment. We're doing linguistic archaeology with a sledgehammer over here. And quite honestly, it's the only tool that works for us. So this Yahweh mythos only works if you accept the premise that God has a proper name to begin with. And that name was known, hidden, then revealed. And now everyone magically knows what it means. But none of that holds up linguistically, historically, in the narrative, or theologically. This hidden name mythos is a very late invention. This idea that God had a secret name, Moses learned it, Israel guarded it, scribes hid it, rabbis whispered it in secret corners. And then suddenly, Christians rediscovered it. This is a post-exile, rabbinic, mystical storyline, not an ancient one. And yes, there is the whole history about, well, they were persecuted and the name had to blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's a piece. But that's not how anyone's talking about it today. This wasn't David's worldview. This wasn't Jesus's worldview. It's not the monarchy, and it's not the patriarchs. It's later myth layered into the text. The name wasn't hidden. It was unstable. It's inconsistent. It's politically manipulated. But the term we call Yahweh, this appears late. It's used unevenly. It's retrofitted into older stories. It's replaced with Adonai when they read it. It's vocalized differently across eras. It's interpreted differently in every tradition. It's in places that have nothing to do with Israel. It's weaponized by scribes and rebranded by modern teachers and scholars. It's not a stable personal name. It's a shifting label and a vocabulary trap. That's what it's evolved into. This idea that God had a proper name is not biblical, it's cultural. Ancient Near East gods had names because they were tied to the land, temples, dynasties, and cult centers. In the ancient Near East, God's names were jurisdictional markers. But the God of David and Jesus, it's not tied to a single mountain, a single temple, a single priesthood, phonetic label. The proper name is a category error. This isn't a name. It's a declaration. It's actually a refusal to play the name game. If you understand, it's I am, or I will be what I will be, to be even more accurate. This means you don't get to pin me down. I am not a local deity. I'm not a mascot. I'm not a tribal idol. I'm not a syllable that you can control in your mystical Kabbalah rituals. I'm not a character in your pantheon. It's Shakespeare, not a business card. It's ontology, not phonetics. It's identity, not branding. It's actually a refusal to be named. Entire Yahweh discourse completely collapses the second you take Exodus 3 seriously. If God is saying, I will be what I will be, and he's not giving a name. He's rejecting the entire category of names. But the rabbis said, good, then you go trust the rabbis. Good luck with that. Trust the rabbis that don't believe in Jesus. Go ahead, that don't have Jesus as their king. Trust those guys. He's refusing to be localized, defined in syllables, and placed in a handy pantheon chart. The name is actually a non-name. It's a philosophical veto to being named. The text itself uses relational identifiers, narrative anchors, and covenant roles. It uses story-based identity. It refuses to collapse God into a phonetic label. That's why everything turned into Lord, because they didn't know what to do with it. So over here, we do what David did, we do what Jesus did, and we do what the prophets did. And we describe God in relational terms. You've got this 8675309 problem in ancient religion. Imagine it's the year 5026. Archaeologists dig up a scrap of paper that says, call Jenny, 8675309. And suddenly, scholars are writing dissertations. Pastors are preaching sermons. Conspiracy theorists are making YouTube videos. Mystics are claiming it's a divine code. And someone writes a very popular book called The Jenny Prophecy. Netflix, new documentary drops. 8675309, The Hidden Signal. And a cult forms called the Order of Jenny. Welcome to it. Meanwhile, the original author was just a bored teenager with a Sharpie. And there really isn't much archaeological evidence that the people carving Yahweh everywhere weren't bored teenagers with Sharpies. It's exactly what happens with ancient graffiti, fragmentary inscriptions, regional deity tags, half-erased syllables, pottery scribbles, boundary stones, cult shorthand. People find these things and assume, because of monotheism again, it's cosmic lore. They immediately attribute it to being something so much more important and valid than perhaps it was to begin with. Because ancient people were just people. They weren't all scribing things so Michael Heiser could find it and write books about it. And the Catholic Church could go ahead and prove they're right. Some of the ancient people were doing. We're inching towards A&E cosmology. but still protecting the old narrative. This is stage 6. This is where the public is now. They know the old model doesn't work. They know the text doesn't support strict, quote unquote, monotheism. They know the world was full of gods. They know Israel's God wasn't the only being in the universe. They know the Bible acknowledges rival powers. But they're just terrified to say the Bible wasn't monotheistic. It assumes a plural cosmos with one supreme covenant deity of David and Jesus. They don't want to say that because that sounds like polytheism and the Western brain short circuits. So we get these half-ass, halfway, weird-ass models that are trying to preserve monotheism to kiss ass to the church while acknowledging the text, but avoiding public panic, avoiding rewriting institutional theology handed to us by the Catholics. They don't want to lose control. The result is a confusing mess that satisfies no one and explains nothing. The ancient Near East worldview, the one the Bible assumes, is that many gods exist, many jurisdictions, many enforcement systems with enforcement entities and entities that send off the enforcement entities, many covenants, many kingdoms. All of this exists, but only one God has a covenant with Israel. Only one God is supreme in authority. This is not monotheism. This is exclusive covenant loyalty-ism. And we're going to see why only one God is supreme in authority. So our next question really becomes, well, why do I say that the God of David and Jesus has supreme authority over all these other gods? Well, in Davidic reality, monolatry is actually the worship of one God without denying the existence of other gods and the ability to ritually interact with those other gods. This is ritual treaty interactions like David's census. Monotheism is the chosen deity is treated as the highest and most powerful, sometimes representing the entire divine essence, but the door's left open for other gods. This is where you get things like challenging and mocking, like the Elijah and Baal showdown. And so exclusive covenant loyalty isn't the same as monotheism. So I guess the question is, well, then which God is the most high, quote unquote, and supreme authority? And why is David's and Jesus's God have that title? Well, the real institutional fear, the thing nobody says out loud because it detonates the entire scaffolding that Western Christianity is built on, is that if ancient Israel wasn't monotheistic, then allegiance is a choice, not a cosmic default. Okay? This detonates Judaism too, by the way. The ancient world was territorial, covenantal, jurisdictional, multi-agent, and multi-deity. Well, in every clan, every household, every king, arguably every bloodline, had to choose their God. This means Abraham chose. Jacob chose. Ruth chose. Solomon chose. David chose. James chose. They all chose their God. And they're not necessarily all the same one. That means it wasn't, there's only one God, so you have no options. It was, there are many gods. Choose your allegiance. That's a completely different world, guys. And the stories are now read, and they make sense. Ruth makes sense now. Jesus makes sense. Solomon makes sense.
I may be an orthodontist, but I know a thing or two about Perfect.
Mayhem is everywhere.
Institutions hate this world. Because if allegiance is a choice, then modern people can choose also. And the one thing institutional religion does not want you to do is choose. If the ancient world wasn't monotheistic, cosmically exclusive, then modern people aren't trapped in one option, in one system, with one narrative and one doctrinal monopoly. From the priesthood down to the scholars. What this means is you can choose your God. You can choose your loyalty. You can choose your covenant. You can choose your king. Thus, you can choose your kingdom. And institutions lose their monopoly. David's God, who is also Jesus's father, wasn't the only deity running around offering contracts. Then Paul's cosmic Christ isn't the only option either. Then Jesus is God, and Paul's God, and Solomon's God for that matter, could all represent different options within the biblical text. That's the panic point. Because if the biblical word was plural, competitive, jurisdictional, covenant-based, then Paul's cosmic, metaphysical, eternal Son Christ is just one interpretation among many, just one God among many. The implications of that is Paul's Christ is just not even the same character as David's God. And even worse, Paul's Christ isn't the same character as the apostles' God. And even worse, Paul's Christ isn't even the same character Paul met in Acts versus who he met in Galatians. So this institutional idea of one God, one Christ, one system collapses into tolerating the multiple denominations of Paul rather than multiple gods, multiple covenants, multiple jurisdictions, multiple choices. It's the nightmare scenario for any centralized authority. But it's exactly why you have, 50,000 denominations of Christianity. Well, it's all the same God. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it is not. It's almost ridiculous to say that. And if people can choose, well, your institutions can no longer enforce obedience. Monotheism, the later philosophical version, is the perfect control mechanism. There's only one God, only one way, only one truth, only one salvation, and it's us. Mediator is us. One church, and it's us. It's a closed system. But the ancient world wasn't like that, and it wasn't. The entire modern system is built on a false premise that the institutions have anything to do with David's God or Jesus's God. And once people realize that, they stop being afraid. They stop being dependent. They stop being controlled and manipulated. They stop believing you have no other options but the church. Suddenly, they do. The real threat isn't really theological. It's structural. Your scholars are being paid to support the structural piece of institutionalized monotheism from ancient Persia all the way through the Catholics. Because if biblical monotheism collapses, the priesthood loses authority and the church loses its monopoly. The church has already lost its monopoly. There's 50,000 denominations. Get a clue. Because the entire system depends on there is only one God, and we represent him. And if you're against us, well, you're against God. If there are different gods, there are different kingdoms. In the ancient world, kingdoms are jurisdictions, and covenants are citizenship. Rituals are your legal paperwork. Blessings are the benefits, and curses are the penalties for adopting or breaking covenants. It's a very simple system. Their worldview was a lot easier than 50,000 denominations, including, and that in the New Age with their cosmic Christ, and you're up to like 100,000. David's system and Solomon's system are not the same religion. I've been saying this, and you might already see this, but let me name it plainly. David's world, the ark and the tabernacle are separate. There's no temple that David's dealing with. There's no centralized priest economy. Sacrifice is used sparingly and legally, not devotionally. Prophets, not priests, hold all the authority. God is mobile, relational, and covenant. Worship is decentralized. That's David's world. But in Solomon's world, well, temple is now a state project. Sacrifice is the daily economic engine. The priesthood holds a bureaucracy. God is enthroned in a building. Worship is centralized, taxable, and controllable. Ritual is compliance. These are two completely different systems, pretending to be one continuous story. That's why your priesthood loves Solomon, not David. But if there's multiple gods, well then, multiple kingdoms exist, multiple legal systems, benefits packages, enforcement agencies. It's not just metaphysics. This is politics, which is exactly how David saw it. And they might not choose Paul's cosmic Christ, the Nicene Trinity, the Imperial Church of Rome, or the denominational system of harlots of Protestantism that all came out of Rome. Satan's not an ancient Near East category. The modern meaning is Satan's a cosmic villain, a fallen angel, the enemy of God, the ruler of all demons, but still ruled by God. It's not a person, not a rebel, not a cosmic entity. It's actually a job title. Demons are not a category. The modern meaning, well, they're evil spirits, fallen angels, minions of Satan, and supernatural attackers. They're agents of disease, night terrors, plague spirits, boundary enforcers, local entities, legal enforcers. Lucifer, not an ancient Near East being. In modern meaning, it's Satan's original name, fallen angel, cosmic rebel. But in biblical meaning, it's actually a mistranslation. It's a metaphor for a Babylonian king. Basically, we'll put a pin in this one. We'll get back here. I'm not just going to hit and run on this one. We got to go deep on this. But in essence, just to summarize for today, put a pin in it. Lucifer as a fallen archangel is a later theological reinterpretation built upon a Latin translation of a metaphor for a prideful earthly king. We need a whole new vocabulary to separate categories because the old vocabulary is clearly contaminated by Greek metaphysics, Persian dualism, Catholic demonology, Protestant spiritual warfare, and modern horror tropes. Purple crayon entities, threshold agents, contract enforcers, jurisdictional powers, boundary spirits, non-Davidic powers, territorial authorities. We can say anything. Sacrifice. Oh, the word sacrifice. Sacrifice logic didn't come from anywhere. We talked about this before. It was already there. It's older than Israel, older than Abraham. It's older than the biblical narrative. It's just part of the primordial operating system. It doesn't explain it because the authors assume that everyone knows how this works. Now, there are arguments. The sacrifice system came into play in the garden. However, it was there even before that. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay. Well, it was brought in from somewhere that already existed. Does that make sense? They didn't invent it. They may have participated for the first time, but it was still already there, even from Eden. So when modern people try to explain sacrifice using Satan, demons, sin, moral guilt, substitution, or atonement, human sacrifice, cosmic rebellion, the whole thing's doomed. Because if sacrifice is legal, not moral, and ritual, not theological, contractual, not symbolic, then it frames Jesus himself in a whole new way. Well, those categories didn't even exist in David's time. This is an ancient Near East logic, not Christian metaphysics. So we really need a whole new vocabulary to talk about entities, jurisdictions, and enforcement agents without dragging in 3,000 years of theological baggage. And I don't know how to do that. So yes, you'll hear me refer to things like demons or Satan, but I'm doing that in a modern sense so everybody knows what we're talking about. They're not actually real covenant terms from the ancient Near East. The worldview is many gods, many jurisdictions, many covenants. Okay? There's no singular cosmic villain. There's no angel demon taxonomy. Everything is political, territorial, and legal. By the Persian periods, well, this is where the trouble starts, because Persia brings in the cosmic dualism, the good versus evil, metaphysical forces. It's all absorbed during the exile. In our Greek period, well, they start to add in all these metaphysical questions about ontology of God. What is a being? There are hierarchies of divinity, immaterial versus material, metaphysical evil, cosmic order. These all get glued onto Jewish thought. And in our Second Temple Judaism, well, this is the incubator for all the categories that Christians assume are ancient, because they assume that Second Temple Judaism represents the ancient Near East God of David in David's religion. It doesn't, okay? The Jews are not original Hebrews. Persian, guys, Persian. But they don't assume that. They assume Second Temple. Second Temple represents everything before it. But this is where the whole spiritual warfare vibe really begins. And by the time we get to early Christianity, well, the stew thickens. Christians inherit all of this dualism and Greek metaphysics, Second Temple demonology, and Roman imperial images. It's a fusion religion at this point. But it's not Jesus's. Church fathers come in. This is where all of these categories become systematized into the institution. Augustine, especially, oh God, do I not like Augustine, cements the idea of metaphysical evil, original sin, cosmic rebellion, and Satan as the archenemy. Augustine becomes the philosophical foundation of all of Western Christianity. Not Jesus, not even Paul. Augustine. Then we get to medieval Christianity, and we go to full fantasy novel. We've got angelic ranks and Lucifer's full biography. Hell becomes a torture chamber. We've got spiritual warfare manuals coming out. Cult rituals come back into play. This is the world that modern Christians think is quote unquote biblical. Then modern evangelicism does not fail to disappoint. They inherit all of this and turn it into demons are everywhere. Satan's attacking you. You're in spiritual warfare. They moralize the entire universe, but none of this is ancient Near East. None of this is the Hebrew biblical story of the family of David. And none of this is Jesus's kingdom message. Here's our chart. We've done this one before. Worshiping other gods means stop opening legal access to foreign powers. That's it. Stop opening portals of authority to beings who now have the right to act in your household against you individually, in your town, your street, your neighborhood, your church. Stop doing it. So when I say things like it's legal, I don't mean the modern courts of heaven idea. We've got to tackle this too, because I've referred to this guy before, but then I don't endorse this guy. Okay, here's why. The legal courts of heaven guy, that's a Pauline cosmic villain system. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ancient Near East covenant law, political treaties, jurisdictional boundaries, and being in covenant with the God of the Davidic monarchy. Two totally different universes. The courts of heaven never mentions the Davidic covenant because it's not even in their system. If the Davidic covenant's not in his system, it's not the same God. This is the biggest red flag. The entire biblical story is that the Davidic monarchy is the legally valid and highest eternal jurisdictional authority, period. There's your biblical plot. And who inherits that scepter? If he's avoiding that, he's not talking about the same legal system in God as I am. Courts of heaven theology. This guy never mentions David. He doesn't mention the covenant with David. Doesn't mention Jesus as the heir and Davidic king. Doesn't mention inheritance or jurisdiction transfer of God's kingdom to the Son of Man. Because the courts of heaven guy, it's not Davidic kingdom based, human sacrifice based. This is Paul, not Jesus. This idea of belief. Are these ideas that we listed out here wrong? I have no idea if they're right or wrong. And quite honestly, I don't care. I'm not about arguing beliefs, because my covenant is not about who's right and who's wrong in which denomination and which church father. That's not what it is. Which rabbi said what. What I'm saying is all of these ideas are just not categories in the ancient Near East Bronze to Iron Age Hebrew cosmology. When I clear things, I'll call out when I'm clearing space. If you listen to a whole tape of mine of clearing out space, I call out satanics, demonics, and ritual thought forms because I need a name for these entities. Okay? Even though demonics wasn't a category in ancient Near East, I still use that word to name these entities. Okay? That's what I'm saying. You've got these Catholic Queen of Heaven exorcisms. There's another category error. Why in the world are you calling on the Queen of Heaven for a Catholic exorcism? What category are you in? David was an exorcist. I've said this before. But even more accurate, David was a legal ritual practitioner, interacting with foreign deities. And David skillfully serviced his people within contract violation and cause and effect enforcement. He's getting rid of these other gods legally through covenant law. And that's actually the same thing Jesus does. David's practicing covenant law on behalf of the people in dealing with these other entities, deities, and gods. And so is Jesus. Jesus isn't fighting the demons. He's overriding them legally. He's fighting the jurisdiction. The Bible doesn't run on belief, it runs on jurisdiction. Modern people literally can't hear this because they've been trained since childhood that religion is belief, salvation is belief, worship is belief, covenant is belief, sin is belief, righteousness is belief, and Jesus is all about belief. They're not understanding what I'm saying. We're speaking completely different languages. We're reading the text through a covenant framework. And they translate that into, oh, she means she has a belief system about covenants. No. That has nothing to do with your internal thoughts. It's about which king you're under. People can't see it because they're conditioned to think faith is an internal belief. Worship is emotional expression. Covenant is a spiritual relationship. No, it's a legal document. Kingdom is just a metaphor. Sin is a moral failure. Salvation is a ticket to the afterlife. Law is ethics, and God is a monotheistic abstraction. So when I say things like jurisdiction, people panic in their brains and they try to shove it back into courts of heaven or spiritual warfare. There's some sort of Pauline guilt logic operating. They have this medieval courtroom imagery. They literally just don't have the categories to understand what I'm saying. I'm speaking in ancient Near East treaty law, but they're hearing religious psychology, and they're two different things. Modern categories are the problem. The Davidic framework is that the Bible is a covenant legal drama. Jurisdiction determines outcomes, not belief. But their framework is, but what do you believe about God? It's like I'm explaining traffic law, and they keep asking, but what do you believe about stop signs? You can believe Ishtar is not real all day long, but if you perform Ishtar's rituals, you're in Ishtar's system, under her legal jurisdiction. Sorry, not sorry. You can believe Jesus is real all day long, but if you're not in his covenant, you're not under his protection. Belief is not the mechanism. Jurisdiction is. Jesus' message was always jurisdictional, not doctrinal. He never says believe the right theology, think the right thoughts, hold the right doctrine. He says, follow me, enter the kingdom, take my yoke. It's easy, it's light. Do what I command, change allegiances. This is jurisdictional language, not psychological or emotional. David would tell you, what do you think King David would tell you? Think David's going to say, just believe your way into a kingdom? No, you don't believe your way into a kingdom, you enter it. Allegiance is action. Covenant's a contract. Worship is service. Loyalty includes obedience. Your blessings is a benefit of the treaty. A curse is a breach of that treaty. Salvation is simply deliverance from death. We're going to get to that in a minute. King is your legal authority, and the kingdom is the jurisdiction. Belief is irrelevant in this system. And this is the system of David and the system of the son of David and his kingdom. So when I say things like covenant law, this is what I'm talking about. I say legal, people think 10 commandments. Those are true. That's true. That's true. That's part of the covenant. Okay, don't hear me wrong. Or then they think Levitical law. No. When I say covenant law, here it is. That's covenant law. Okay? Your 10 commandments and stuff, that comes in with your loyalty, your obedience. You're acting the way you're told to act in the kingdom. Believing in angels, demons, cosmic villains, or whatever else has nothing to do with which kingdom you're under. You can believe in angels, demons, fallen angels, watchers, Nephilim, Lucifer, ranks of demons, spiritual warfare, cosmic rebellion, astral parasites. You can believe in purple crayon monsters. Believe in all of it. Believe in none of it. It literally doesn't matter, because belief is not an operating system of the kingdom. Jurisdiction is. It's brutally simple. You are under the authority of the king whose covenant you enter, not the king you believe in, not the king you think about, not the king you have opinions about, but the king you align with. And everything else is noise. In the ancient world, you think Baal cares if you believe in him? Shamash didn't care if you believed him in either. Asherah didn't care if you believed in her. We're going to see a lot of this when we study, in the future coming up, when we look at bloodlines in Samson and how other gods react when they get a broken covenant from a bloodline Israelite person in the ancient Near East, and how that whole thing is political, with one God parading around a covenant heir of another God. Think of a political prisoner, guys. Think of Samson as a political prisoner. You'll start to get to where we're going to go with this next. God's cared about loyalty, compliance, alignment, and treaty obligations. They had boundaries in their jurisdiction and their covenants. Belief is a Greek category. Jurisdiction is an ancient Near East category. I'm speaking of an ancient Near East Hebrew covenant, not a Jewish one, not a Christian one, not a Greek one. And they're hearing Jewish, Christian, or Greek metaphysics, and that's the disconnect. They think Hebrew is Jewish. No. Demonology doesn't even matter in kingdom alignment. And boy, I study demonology. Don't get me wrong. Because of my experience, I could talk to you about it all day long in these covenants and what they offer. We'll do a little bit of that. But demonology is post-Persian, post-Greek, post-Enoch, post-Paul, post-Catholic, post-medieval. It's not the mechanism of the biblical system. It's helpful to know some of these gods and what their contracts are and what they represent. Right? Know your enemy, right? But this whole pen ink spilling on demonology doesn't really matter. It's not the mechanism of the covenant system of David. David's mechanism, the son of David's mechanism, is which king's authority are you under? What covenant are you in? Which jurisdiction covers you and protects you? What benefits are you getting from your contract? That's it. You can believe in 1,000 demon ranks. If you're not in the Davidic jurisdiction, none of that belief changes your legal status. You can believe in 0 demons. If you are in the Davidic jurisdiction, you're covered. Belief is irrelevant because jurisdiction is everything. But I always say, I don't care what you believe. Just make sure your beliefs don't throw you off track, right? Well, how can your beliefs then throw you off track? Because these gods are gods of impersonation. We saw that with Paul in Acts 9. You have people like Michael Heiser out there promoting, well, Paul harmonized it, but there's no syncretism. Changing names without changing jurisdiction? You decide, oh, well, I'm going to start saying Yeshua instead of Jesus, but still follow Paul's cosmic Christ that the New Age promotes now. You're just changing the name. You're not changing your kingdom. You do harmless rituals. This is where all the arguments over your holidays come from. Your baptism. You've got random people out there baptizing other random people, and no one's asking about what covenant. You see this in David's calendar feast. You know, David sat down back in Luke when we were reading about David and the key of David and the bread. David sat down to the calendar feast. That's not a violation. Okay? But blessing a Thanksgiving turkey with the cosmic Christ and eating it? Well, that could be. It's a different type of lens. What deity? What rituals? Are you having a calendar feast or are you celebrating a deity? I would sit down at David's calendar feast long before I'd eat a turkey on Thanksgiving that was blessed to the New Age, Pauline, Greek, cosmic Christ. It's not happening. And sacrifice, well, we've got to reset this to think of it as a legal mechanism. Sacrifice is I grant you jurisdiction. Incense is I acknowledge your presence. Offerings, I accept your authority. Feasts, I enter your covenant. So when Israel worshipped other gods, they were signing contracts, opening legal doors, gaining territorial rights. They're giving territorial rights to these other gods. They're activating obligations and inviting foreign powers into their land and to their household. Prophets are running around through the whole Bible saying, stop manipulating the paperwork. You see that today, okay? This, and I'm really sorry, I hardly ever speak about modern Judaism. But if you can't look at modern Judaism and see how they're manipulating the paperwork with all of their, I mean, you know, that thing in New York where it's like, oh, we've got this magic line that you can't cross. It's like they're constantly manipulating the laws to get around the paperwork. They're hedging their bets. Israel in the ancient Near East kept trying to diversify their spiritual portfolio, okay? They're diversifying. They're appeasing multiple powers. They want to keep God happy and Baal happy and Ishtar happy and everybody else happy. That's what Israel was doing. They used ritual and laws as leverage because they wanted to play the system. They were gaming the system. And the prophets are responding with stop opening doors to other gods. You're giving away your jurisdiction. And pretty soon, you're not going to have any jurisdiction at all. Welcome to the prophets. Write that sentence down. Stop opening doors to the competition. You're destabilizing your own territory. If you open the prophets and read it with that lens, suddenly it makes sense. So then what's the kingdom? Well, this is your husband protocol, okay? Husbands, provide, protect, and handle the external world. I'm sorry, feminists. That's how it is. That's how it was. That's how it still is in the ancient Near East. That's how it still is in the Middle East today. Okay? These Western women have displaced the husbands. Sorry, not sorry. You can see this with Saudi wives and the role of their husband. I would sit at lunch in a cafe with the girls, and their husbands sat outside in the car waiting for them. And I'm like, you guys' husbands just sit there waiting for you and they're not upset? No, because it's what they do. It's not like you're whipped. It's my duty to stand guard outside while my wife enjoys herself. I deal with the external world so she can be a girl. Calling a plumber to plunge a toilet insults the husband, okay? It's like you have a wonderful husband who's perfectly capable, but you ask the neighbor to move the recliner. It's asking a coworker to entertain you after work. It's waving down another guy to change the tire. It's arranging a sleazy timeshare guy to organize your finances and asking a bartender to walk you to the car. All with your husband present. and fully capable. Okay? With your husband right there. That's what Israel's doing. And why God is always speaking in terms of adultery. So let's take a look as if we're shopping, right? We're shopping for like healthcare packages. Well, we've got Baal-Hadad's our storm god. And that jurisdiction is rainstorms, agricultural cycles, weather protection. The benefits package is good harvest, rains in season, and protection from drought. Sign up with Baal, you can have all these things. Baal-Hadad can't reverse death and can't grant eternal life. That's not part of the contract. Baal-Hadad can't override other jurisdictions. He dies every dry season in the mist cycle. But Jesus says, I calm storms with a word. I'm not subject to seasonal death. I don't cycle in and out of power. Jesus overrides Baal's entire domain without even naming him. Let's look at Asherah, our fertility goddess. What is her contract? I told you, it's like these guys were shopping for, HMOs. Her jurisdiction is fertility and sexuality, birth cycles, household prosperity. Benefits package? Well, you get plentiful children and a fruitful womb, a household blessing, and social continuity. The drawbacks and limitations: no authority over death, no inheritance beyond the grave, no covenant loyalty structure. So Jesus reframes this by saying, in my kingdom, life replaces fertility as a path to continuity. Jesus shifts the entire logic of future generations to eternal life. Moloch. We get underward fire and protection through sacrifice. Moloch, in his jurisdiction, offers protection through very, very costly sacrifice, including your children. Wants fire and underworld power. The benefits package? Well, you get military protection, victory in battle, safety through extreme offerings. But the limitations? Moloch requires escalating sacrifice. He offers no resurrection, no covenant inheritance, no relational loyalty. Jesus, in the New Testament, reframes Moloch. I offer protection through my sacrifice, not yours. Jesus flips the entire economy. Shamash, our sons of Moab. His jurisdiction is war, national victory, and territorial expansion. Your benefits include military success, territorial security, and national identity. The limitations of Shamash's contract is there's no afterlife promise, no resurrection, no cross-death continuity. Jesus reframes it and says, my kingdom's not won by war. My victory is over death itself. Jesus reframes victory as resurrection, not conquest. Well, I should say, Jesus reframes victory as resurrection, past, and eternal life offering, future, not conquest. You've got our Egyptian solar and afterlife system with Re and Osiris. The jurisdiction is solar rebirth, underworld navigation. Pharaoh's divine status, and the benefit package is, well, your elite's ritual afterlife. You get a divine status for the wealthy. You have a ritualized rebirth cycle and a cosmic order. But the limitations here is only elites get the good rebirth. There's no universal resurrection in eternal life. There's no personal covenant. There's no defeat of death, just the management of it. Jesus reframes this. I'm not offering elite afterlife access. I'm offering eternal life to anyone who joins my kingdom. So Jesus offers what Egypt restricted and controlled. Mot. This is our Canaanite death god. Mot's got his own contracts. Mot's jurisdiction is death. decay, underworld, the final boundary after you cross that liminal space. Benefits package, there aren't any. Mot is not a benefactor. Mot, he's a terminus, extinguisher. Limitations, well, he offers nothing. He rules by inevitability. Can't be bargained with. Jesus says, I entered Mot's domain and walked out alive. This is the core of his kingdom claim. So the Davidic kingdom, which was Jesus's actual message, the jurisdiction is life. Resurrection, past. When I say past, I mean past from Jesus. And eternal life for those in the future after Jesus. You get covenant inheritance, eternal. He's got eternal kingship, and you're part of that. You've got an eternal inheritance. Justice and restoration offers protection, healing, authority over all rival powers. The benefit package is you've got eternal life and resurrection, covenant membership, legal standing, protection from rival jurisdictions, healing and restoration. You get a king who beat death. You get a king with mercy, grace, and a light yoke. Limitations, well, you actually have to join the kingdom, not just wave a name around. You can't mix jurisdictions. Loyalty is huge. You can't claim benefits from a king you don't serve. But the unique selling point is only one king beat death. Only one kingdom offers resurrection and eternal life to all its members. Everything else offers whatever it offers, but not that. You must obey the king and follow the rules. The ancient Near East offered reign, fertility, war victory, protection, or elite rebirth. But only the Davidic kingdom offers eternal life, because only its king defeated death. There's no need for Paul. There's no need to universalize it. Just kingdoms, jurisdictions, and what each king can deliver. Among all the ancient Near East and global kingdoms, this one has a king who beat death. If you want what this kingdom offers, join it. If you want another kingdom, go there. But don't blame this kingdom when the benefits of that kingdom don't include this kingdom's benefits package. Jesus' whole message was the restoration of the Davidic monarchy, not a religion, not a doctrine, not a moral system. It's universalized across the globe. Not believe in me and go to heaven formula. He's announcing the Davidic kingdom is back. The king is here. The death contract at Eden is being overturned. The covenant is reopening. That's a political, legal, and jurisdictional proclamation. Jesus' authority comes from beating death, not from theology. Jesus' kingdom is unique because he dies and breaks the death contract. He inherits the throne of David. He becomes the eternal king when the scepter is passed to the Son of Man. He's claiming jurisdiction. He's not saying, I'm the only God, or my God is the only God, or other gods don't exist. He's not even saying everyone must believe in me. He's not saying any of that. What he's saying is, I have divine monarch authority over everything, including death. I'm the only king who has defeated death, so I'm the only one that can carry you through it. That's the entire selling point. And why I think I was threatened with soul death as a child, not hell, right there. Other kingdoms still exist, they're just not this one. This is where Paul muddies the water by trying to universalize everything. Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus assumes there's rival kingdoms, rival gods, rival jurisdictions, rival covenants, and rival benefits packages. He never says all the other gods are fake. He says, my kingdom is at hand. Choose your allegiance. That's ancient Near East logic, not Greek metaphysics. The Davidic covenant and the sacrificial system were never the same. Not before Jesus, not during Jesus, not after Jesus. Well, until the church rewrote it. Jesus didn't, quote unquote, replace the temple system. He didn't fulfill it in the Pauline sense as a human sacrifice. He didn't upgrade it. He didn't abolish it. He simply wasn't even a part of it because his kingdom runs on a different legal logic entirely. He wasn't Levitical. Neither was David. If you join the Davidic kingdom, you get eternal life, kingdom inheritance, covenant protection, legal standing, and you carry kingdom authority. If you join another kingdom, well, you get whatever that king offers. Nothing more, nothing less. Jesus doesn't hide this. He literally states that reality. Paul's system is a completely different architecture. He universalizes, abstracts, philosophizes, creates a sun god rebirth salvation formula, detaches the entire kingdom from Israel's inheritance, detaches Jesus from David, detaches eternal life from monarchy, and allegiance from law. He's got to attach it to Judaism or post-Persian Pharisaical teachings. That's not David. He uses David's name like once or twice, but he's attaching Jesus to the system that he works for. Paul's building a religion, not entering a kingdom, but Jesus builds a kingdom, not a religion. This is why the attitude, you want to ascend? Go ascend. You want sun god rebirth? Go do that. Just don't blame us when it doesn't work out. Not being arrogant. It's jurisdictional realism. It's the same tone as Elijah when he said, if Baal is God, follow him. But if the Lord is God, follow him. Elijah never said Baal doesn't exist. He said, let's see which jurisdiction actually delivers. So, as we continue in Luke, let's see which jurisdiction actually delivers. Because we're going to see Jesus lay out the kingdom constitution in Luke 6. Coming up next.
Energy. Energy. You cannot fuck with this. Energy. You cannot fuck with this energy. Love to all those in the steps. All of those who are listening. Don't miss the message, judging me. You cannot fuck with this energy. Energy.